Hello, everyone. Very good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all the participants who have joined us for this India Security Summit. So, we have our panelists with us, and I will request my panelists, starting with Rajesh, to introduce themselves before we jump into the Q&A.
Thank you, Nitin. Morning and good evening, all. My name is Rajesh Hariharan. I have about 17 years of experience in cybersecurity. I currently head InfoSec in India in my current organization, which is Global Payments. I cover a wide spectrum of domains such as AppSec, security engineering, SOC, and identity and access management. Specifically on PCI, we manage internal compliance and also facilitate the external certification. Thank you.
Yeah. Good evening, everyone. I'm Vishwanath, Vishy in short. I take care of the risk management for NPCI. I'm the Chief Risk Officer at NPCI. So NPCI, for most of those who don't know much about NPCI, we kind of manage almost 65 to 70% of India's digital payment ecosystem. So that's about NPCI in a nutshell for you. I have overall experience of about 24 years, of which a significant portion of can say about 15 plus years in the area of risk management. Happy to be here.
Hello everyone, my name is Swati Sharma. I'm part of AISPL AWS India. I help financial customers in their cloud adoption journey whenever they have any question around regulatory security compliance or industry compliance like PCI DSS. I help them on those pointers.
Thank you, panelists, for your brief introduction. Let me now quickly jump on to what we have been here try to as we just want to try to resolve so many of the questions and concerns that we have. And here now, I would start where we were. If I have to look back to the start of 2020 before COVID had arrived, I will start having this question probably answered from Swati and Vishwanath. I think if you can answer this, how would you describe the payment market from an Indian perspective?
I think pre-2020, was a golden era. Now I think it's been it looks like a pretty long time, pre-COVID. So I think pre-COVID, it was more of, I should say that, the markets were more of, the POS and online transactions were equally distributed, more or less like 50% types. But our, we still had quite a chunk of transactions coming from cross-border. So that was largely the scenario. It was pre-COVID. Cash was still a major player. ATM withdrawals were really very high, and of course we had those swings during the festive seasons, etc., which was going on. So which was the regular seasonal swings which you generally notice. But largely, if I have to kind of summarize the digital payment ecosystem, you can simply say that mostly 50% was on point of sale, while remaining was on e-commerce platform. That's how it was.
I think I agree with what Vishy said. What I feel that payment space has been very tech savvy segment if I talk about the financial industry altogether. I remember one of the customer, they wanted to move to AWS because they had target to double their transaction, and they were able to move to cloud, AWS cloud, within 3 weeks time, and they were able to achieve the transaction from 25 million to 50 millions. One of the other customer, they had objective of meeting the scalability as per the demand. So in payment space, there are peak times, and then customers want to make sure that they are getting the efficient tech experience without any failure in the transaction. So they wanted to move from outside India to India region, and they were able to do that without much downtime. Actually, they achieved it within like 4 minutes of downtime. This particular segment has been keen in innovation. They have been innovating. So even pre-COVID, we have seen a large tech adoption in the payment space.
Thanks, Swati. Thanks, Rishi. Moving on to Rajesh. Rajesh, what were your biggest concerns from a security perspective?
Now, the biggest security concern, even before pandemic, was always on data security. So there is the catchphrase, right? Follow the money. So the hackers are always interested in where the money lies. So data, whether it is at rest, use, or transit, has always been a big challenge for the companies to maintain topmost security. In fact, there was a study conducted by Morphisec where they pointed out that there was a 68% increase in the attack related to Endpoint in 2019. And I'm saying just a year before the pandemic. So, despite having all the leading players releasing out standards related to endpoint security, it continues to be a big challenge for every organization. And given the introduction of mobile devices, it has become much more challenging to maintain compliance and also ensuring security.
Sure, Rajesh. Thanks for that. So, Rishi, would you have described this as an optimistic period?
Yeah, it was a pretty optimistic period. So pre-COVID is always optimistic, so to say. Specifically on the payment side, it was really optimistic. If you look at it, the maximum number of fintechs are actually operating in this space. So a lot of innovation was on the cards. So payments using sound technology and few other aspects. So that was really buzzing. So and of course NFC was. Kind of taking off at that point of time in India specifically. So that was a real optimistic period. And so if you look at the ATMs per se, I think most of the banks were trying to go the last mile in terms of completing the ATM EMV migration as well. So it was a pretty optimistic period. We were waiting for a real good time, and then landed COVID. You know.
That's true, and I think pandemic has taken a toll, and we'll discuss what happened during the COVID. But Swati, how would you look at your from your organization perspective? Cloud has been a very topic of discussion throughout the year and last year.
Saying 2020 as challenging year would be like an understatement for, I mean, everyone. I mean, I'm not talking only about the industry per se. I'm talking about like even for individuals. Prolonged period of COVID has made our life completely different, and we have now a new normal, what we call it. Talking specifically about the from the industry per se, I'm truly amazed with the approach that customers have taken, and they have identified the key technologies on which they can rely to offer the better customer experience without impacting uh, uh, their books actually. So uh, we customers have they had two challenges. They had to sustain the financial impacts that were there, and they had to continue to serve their customers even in better way. So they had to innovate in a way that they are able to reach to the new set of customers, where there is a increase of e-commerce transactions or contactless transactions. So they have to innovate. They have to make sure that their financial books are in control. And we have seen number of customers adopting cloud because they wanted to give a better digital experience to new set of customers. And considering that in India, the mobile and internet accessibility has increased over the time, we have seen customers have also innovated to offer better payment channels through mobile and through other internet channels.
Sure. Thanks, Swati. As Elijah said, so along came COVID, and it changed the world. And now, as we all know, that we are a year into the pandemic. So moving on next to the next, Rajesh, what was your biggest challenge that you faced during the COVID?
I'll tie back to the previous point that I mentioned about endpoint. But now the heavy reliance is on mobile devices. Gone are the days where We used to have a corporate asset, whether it is a desktop or a laptop, sitting within the LAN where it is fully. But now we are talking about pandemic situation where everybody is working from home. There is a big question mark around security of these devices. And to add on to the challenge, we have smartphones, IoTs, whatnot. And all these devices that I just mentioned puts a challenge on the general infrastructure because these devices are not managed as good as how the traditional laptop or a desktop is. I'll kind of give you some numbers which will substantiate why there is a heavy reliance on devices. I read a report by IBCA that before pandemic it was about 2 lakh crore worth transaction that we made, and now it is supposed to touch about 7 lakh crore by financial year 2025. I'm sure Vishwanath would be able to vouch and substantiate more on that. But the point I'm trying to make is there are more and more reliance on these mobile devices, and that would put a challenge on people who manage security with all these devices. And one of the Kaspersky report in 2020 says about 5 million malicious packages are available on the Android platform. So you can imagine the staggering numbers and the gravity of the issue that we currently.
Sure, Rajesh. Vishy, I think moving on to you,
Yeah.
being sitting on one of the critical position, with NPCI. So how you have looked at one of this biggest challenge? Because I remember, and that was the time you joined NPCI at that point of time, and I think you have to immediately start working from home. So what would your take on the challenges during the COVID?
Yeah, if I have to add to what Rajesh has said, so of course it's a no-brainer that digital transactions skyrocketed during COVID. Everyone knows about that. But for us, if you look at it, it kind of doubled. Right, UPI kind of touched 2 billion in one of the recent months. So 2 billion transactions in a month, and till recently it was hovering around about 1 billion. So it was like almost doubling of the transactions. So what it actually led to was lot of digital transactions penetrated in the rural and deep geolocations as well. So we saw a strong shift in transactions happening from those locations per se. So, but these are customers who are forced into digital. Forget about digital literacy. Most of them were not even literate. So that being the case, they were forced into using a digital mode of a transaction, and so they were really happy. And this was a forced change, which kind of helped us and benefited us, but also came with the challenge of awareness, customer awareness, right? So if they don't know how to use this properly, so obviously they get cheated by a lot of people. So a lot of social engineering frauds increased, and some of these people were they lost some of the money as such. And that's when we had to work very closely with the law enforcement and come out with some kind of a framework to ensure that the complaints are easily registered, and customers don't suffer much. But I still feel that digital literacy is a big challenge. We all have a responsibility towards that, and more as we go into tier 4, tier 5, tier 6 cities, more and more we go into deep geo. This is going to be really important. That's a big challenge if you ask me. Second one I would say is just taking on from what Rajesh had left. Endpoint security is a major issue, and with respect to a new way of working, it's very important that we give the confidence to the staff, our own employees, and they are the most vulnerable lot, right? So if there is a malware which can come into my system through any of them, so I'm as strong as how equipped they are. In case if there is a weak employee who kind of clicks on a phishing mail and answers, clicks on a phishing mail and gives out some information, there is a possibility of a malware sneaking in through him, right, into our system. So those are the things which are quite challenging. In addition to maintaining employee morale and motivation, of course, the security from an endpoint perspective was a big challenge. Things like updation of your antivirus, etc. So those were the kind of challenges which we had to deal with. So that I think these were the couple of major challenges which I would say. Though there were a few other things as well.
Swati, what would you look as the biggest challenge during the COVID?
I think industry has to evolve with number of controls that they need to focus on. Uh, there are already set of golden standard like PCI DSS, PCI 3DS where it is applicable. It's about implementing those controls in correct way is also important, right? Identifying the data where it is, and then keeping that data in secure way. I think data security, as Rajesh has highlighted earlier, that it is one of the top priority. It should be a top priority for the customers or entities which are dealing with. So when it comes to payment data, it is overlapping with some of the personal data or PII data as well. So entities need to identify like where their critical data is and the controls which they can implement easily, like putting the right kind of network architecture where their critical data is not being stored on some of the public facing components, and then enabling the right set of configuration where they are keeping the data encrypted as PCI DSS says in requirement 3.4, and then enabling the controls like enabling logs, putting the right kind of access management, and obviously the requirements which are mentioned in PCI DSS 12, like putting the risk management controls in place, training and awareness. I think control library is there. It's about just implementing it in right context and with right spirit is very important.
So what we also observed was that some of the organizations, so we deal with a whole lot of banks in the ecosystem. In fact, all the banks in the Indian ecosystem, right? So some of them were not in a position to scale quickly, right? So as we kind of the digital transactions, skyrocketed. Some of these banks are not also able to scale up to that level. So scalability and resiliency were also a big challenge. So we had to kind of ensure that some of our ecosystem partners have that capability. So that was also one challenge I found, and much what else.
Sure, Rishi. I think that's really insightful. Now, I think I think we all agree that there has been an increase in the digital payments, whether it's a e-commerce through or using the contactless cards or the UPI payments. I think both in the numbers in both value and volume has been increasing. I understand, and there has been also the criminal activities, which she just highlighted. There has been frauds around. What are the sort of attacks that have been common in India? I remember you Vishi highlighting on phishing, but more beyond phishing, what do you see as one of the common attacks during the pandemic?
See, we saw a steep increase in the social engineering frauds. So different forms of phishing. One could be phishing, the other one could be a phishing type of an attack. So beyond this, also we have seen some kind of increase in cybersecurity breaches. So data breaches have increased significantly. So though there are quite a few players who have come out and kind of denied, but then quite a lot of these actors have also kind of displayed some of these data in the darknet, which has been taken from the darknet, just to substantiate that they do have control of the data. So these data breaches are kind of really worrisome because the customer loses the confidence in the ecosystem, right? Those kind of things. So that's a big issue which we saw. Of course, some of the players also reported to us kind of DDoS attacks, etc. Nothing big per se. Most of it has been thwarted, but still those attacks have actually increased. And of course, few of I'm also aware of few cases where there were a few ransomware attacks as well. So those are the kind of things which we have seen as a steep increase during the pandemic.
Sure. Rajesh, how you would have been? What kind of attacks that you have been seeing there?
This is an interesting question. I would echo what Vishwanath had said about the various types of attack. Just a little bit of history. So in the probably 15, 20 years ago, we used to experience an attack called as a credit card skimmer, where somebody installs an electronic device into an ATM or a kiosk machine just to skim the data if somebody inserts their credit card or a debit card. Now, those days are gone. People are aware of such malpractices. It is pretty much say a given that those type of attacks are either less or probably not exist anymore. But now everything is over web, everything is digital. So there is an increase in the amount of attack on the web application. And also the various payment applications that support all these transactions. So back in about 2010, since then we keep hearing about Mage Card, which is a group of about 13 criminal groups. They primarily target payment card industry. Again, they involve in either stealing of credit card information or exfiltration of data. As Vishy mentioned, phishing, wishing, ransomware, these are also on the rise. One particular attack that I would like to reiterate here is on stolen credit cards. Now, there is some time that is left before such cards get blocked, and criminals who steal such card information try to make some transaction and see how much money can they get out of these transactions. So these type of carding attacks are being constantly monitored, especially in my organization, just to identify all these fraudulent transactions and disable those kind of, activity. Apart from that,
Sure.
the criminals have also gone one step ahead. They know that there are certain thresholds that are defined. So beyond which, if they try to make some transaction, it gets identified automatically with all these AI ML coming into play. So the next thing that they did is on low value transaction, where they make a very small payment, which generally goes unnoticed. Now, I must admit that I was a victim of this as well. I made uh, a purchase on an e-commerce website, and then when I looked at the credit card statement, I found about six such transactions where the payment was made and then it was reversed. And then when I looked at, I was trying to compare the payment where it was made and then reversed. I found two payments which did not get reversed. So even though it is of low value, I could still see that they tried manipulating with these kind of, breaking the system or beating the logic.
That's true, Rajesh. I think I think the frauds have been there. I think moving on quickly. I think we have very less time. Swati, what would your take would be on what kind of frauds or the attacks that you have been seeing on the from the cloud perspective?
I think security in the cloud has been one of the area which has been exploited, right? So, sometime customers when they move to cloud, they have extreme assumption that they don't have to do anything to achieve PCI DSS or to secure their data. There is a set of responsibility that they need to take care of. And especially if I call out some of the misconfiguration related attacks that industry have seen in last few years, that could have been mitigated very easily. If I'm talking about S3, it is very easy to set a config rule to detect like what S3 buckets are open with sensitive data. And even if you want to mitigate those with automated way, you can encrypt those data buckets. You can move those data buckets from public to private network zone. And by default, some of these services can help in achieving the security and compliance objective. For example, if someone has configured AWS Security Hub, they can easily see how many PCI DSS controls are in place and how many controls are missing, and so that they can take the action accordingly. So, customers who have not done the configuration for security in the cloud control, I think they have been targeted, and there can be some better mechanism in place to address those concern areas. In India, we have a program especially for fintech customers where AWS help them in identifying the security controls that they can enable with least efforts. And we have a security assessment programs for payment and fintech customers in India. So customers can actually leverage some of these things and they can achieve higher security controls.
Sure, Swati. So I think we just have 5 minutes. I think, but I this last 5 7 minutes, I just want to spend on looking forward. I would like to ask some questions about how do we see rest of the 2021 and beyond 2021, which is 2022. So I'll start with Vishy. If you can just guide us, what you see, how you see the payments going beyond 2021 and how we are seeing 2021.
So Nitin, I think some of these changes which we have witnessed in the last year or so, are some of these are irreversible. I continue to see a lot of increase in the digital transactions. UPI volume is going to further go up. we have seen that we have kind of empowered the small and micro segment kind of customers. Somebody like who sells tender coconut on the roadside, the tea wallas on the roadside. So we have equipped all those guys to kind of transact digitally now. So that is a kind of an irreversible change. So that habit has actually caught on to them. The regulator has also taken a lot of steps. NCN for this NFC, the limits have been expanded now to about 5,000 rupees per transaction. Earlier it was 2,000, so we can expect a spike in these NFC transactions. Though in terms of adoption, still here you don't actually get to see the tap and go. Most of the times, the merchant takes the card from you, does the tap and gives it back to you. But still, those habits will change. But nevertheless, we are going to see a spike in those the segments. And you will be aware that a couple of days back, RBI has again come out with a circular on with respect to PPI and interoperability of wallets. So we will see a lot of transactions between wallet to wallet and cash withdrawals from wallet accounts, etc. So those things have been enabled. So micro and small transactions will continue to grow. That is one thing which is irreversible. And I also see some frauds which are inevitable and which will go in that direction. So we have already started seeing frauds in the name of COVID donations and O2 concentrators and things like that. So we are working with law enforcement. We need to continue to work on that segment as an industry. I think these are how the trends are going to go. From a working perspective, I think the way people have embraced to digital technology has changed. I think that is again irreversible. Though people might still come to offices in a post-COVID era, the travel might still not pick up. So these are some of my thoughts on how we can see the post-COVID impact.
Sure. Swati?
I think I echo what Vishy has said, that the changes which have been done will remain here. I see more innovation in the payment space happening. I think buy now, pay later is going to be a area where a lot of innovation we can expect. And entities are going to emphasize a lot on the scalability. If you look at some of the master direction which came from the regulators, they have also given a lot of emphasis on the scalability of the infrastructure, especially for the payment digital payment side. And they have highlighted that the infrastructure has to be elastic in a way that the end customer is not facing efficiencies issue or the transaction failure. So we are going to see a lot of innovation in this space. The changes which have been done will remain here, and buy now, pay later is something that a lot of entities are exploring and they are focusing on that.
Sure, Swati. Rajesh, before I move on and try to get your views, from all the panelists about how we are looking at the future, but on different technologies, Rajesh, what would be your thought?
I'll make it quick in the interest of time. So I expect that people will start adopting zero trust. The traditional trust but verify no longer holds good. So we see a lot of momentum in adoption of zero trust framework. Google has pioneered that. So we do have an example that we can follow. The second one is, as Swati said, cloud adoption will be on the rise. Although, as she mentioned, there is a lot of issues with the configuration piece of it. But as and when we get used to this cloud, I think we should be fine into the future.
Sure. I think before we end the panel discussion, I would like to have few quick remarks from each one of you. How you, what kind of guidance or advice that you would want to pass on to the attendees from the payment security perspective. I'll start with Vishy with you.
Yeah, I think the organizations will have to take cybersecurity very seriously now. So because it's become a way of life. Earlier, cybersecurity was a good to have thing. It's a word which was used more colloquially than practically. So, but now cybersecurity is for real. If we have to scale up digitally, then that is something which organizations have to embrace, put in a lot more money and budget into that. I think that's the suggestion from my side.
Sure, Vishy. Swati?
I think I'll summarize it by saying that cloud is secure, use it securely, and you already have golden standards like PCI standards. Use those standards for implementing security controls. You can use those controls like best practices, even if it's not applicable for your business or your particular digital channel, payment channel. Uh, I think considering these two, we can have better security posture. That security controls are there, implemented and implemented in a right way.
Rajesh, any last remarks from your side to close the session?
Uh, Sure. What I would say is security cannot be an afterthought. It has to be embedded right from the moment the organization thinks of launching even a product related to payment. Security has to be considered right from, say, the feasibility design aspect, so that it becomes a part of your overall development cycle. And it traditionally we used to think security at the last. Now we can't afford that anymore. So if we embrace security at the beginning, I think we should be in a good space.
Sure. Thanks. Thank you, Swati. Thank you, Vishi. Thank you, Rajesh, for the insights that you have given to all our participants today. Looking forward to having you again in future in one of our India Security Summit or the security forums or the community forums that we do globally. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.